This week we've been working on a couple of machines for SolidWorks, and usually when we build machines for SolidWorks, it's quite an interesting process for us as PC builders because of the hardware requirements. Now, SolidWorks is pretty similar to a program like Autodesk Inventor, not only in how the user uses the software, but also in how the software uses the hardware. Both of them need a pretty powerful CPU, especially in single-thread performance, but multi-thread is important to an extent as well. They need a good amount of RAM depending on the sizes of your projects, and the GPU needs to be powerful enough to, not cause any bottlenecks for the CPU. The main limitation when it comes to hardware specification, though, is in the graphics card. In Autodesk's official hardware requirements, they mention that Quadro cards are officially supported. But we found in our own testing, and also the general consensus online, is that GeForce cards are absolutely fine. Autodesk products actually don't make use of Quadro features, and this means that you can save a lot of cash by going with a GeForce graphics card. They perform a lot better and they cost a lot less, and it also means that you can allocate more of your budget towards a more powerful CPU or more RAM or storage. SolidWorks differs, on the other hand. It actually does require a Quadro graphics card, and if you're using a GeForce card instead of a Quadro card in SolidWorks, you'll notice that you encounter a lot of glitches. You won't have the same kind of performance you would have gotten from a Quadro, and in fact, certain features like real view graphics won't work at all. Other processes that can make use of the GPU would include silhouette edges, hidden line display, and occlusion culling, just to name a few. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the main priority in SolidWorks is actually CPU performance. So while you do need a relatively powerful GPU, you still want to be able to spend most of your cash on the CPU. Last year, this was causing quite a bit of an issue for us because the two options that were available were the Quadro T2000 and the RTX A4000. The difference in price between these two cards was, the RTX A4000 cost about 3 times as much as the T2000, and the difference in performance was just as massive. The T2000 gets marginally outperformed by the GTX 1650 4GB, while the RTX A4000 is closer in performance to the RTX 3070. And of course, when I'm talking about this performance, I mean in non-Quadro tasks. If we're talking about processes that do require Quadro, it would be no contest. The Quadro cards would win because they're what you need. So if you're not familiar with NVIDIA's lineup, basically that means that between the T2000 and the A4000, there are performance levels that in GeForce you would have had GTX 1650, GTX 1660, 1660 Super, RTX 3050, RTX 3060, RTX 3060 Ti, and then there is the RTX 3070. That became pretty frustrating from a part selection standpoint because, as you can imagine, it was just really difficult to get optimal performance at sort of in between price points when you don't have quite enough to opt for a 20,000 Rand graphics card, but you still want decent performance. So that's why we were really, really excited when the RTX A2000 was released. That is an NVIDIA workstation grade graphics card that sits right between the T2000 and the A4000, and it's just a very interesting card. It's got 6 GB of RAM, but it's an absolutely tiny card, and it doesn't even need external power from the power supply. It gets everything it needs straight from the motherboard. In terms of performance, the RTX A2000 is incredibly average. But this is exactly the kind of card that we need for systems like this. This RTX A2000 means that we were able to, within our client's budget, specify an Intel Core i9-12900K, which is the best possible CPU for SolidWorks. We also put in 32 gigs of DDR5 memory, and we've got 2 terabytes of PCIe 4 storage in each one. So yeah, the performance on the A2000 isn't all that impressive. But the combination of this performance with the i9-12900K is a lot better than if we were to pull back on the CPU so that we could fit in an RTX A4000, in SolidWorks in particular. For just like a couple thousand Rand more, you get on the CPU, you get a lot higher performance. But with the GPU, it would need to be, like 10,000 Rand between one GPU and the next in this particular case. We have a strong feeling that the A2000 is going to be quite an important component when it comes to specification of computers that require a Quadro. It doesn't feel like quite as much of a compromise as the T2000 did. And it doesn't feel like as much of a money sink as the A4000 felt. The A4000 is a very strong graphics card, but I mean the A2000, it outperforms the GTX 1660 and it doesn't cost that much more. So it doesn't feel like quite as much like, you know, spending a ton of cash on Quadro. So yeah, in summary, these extremely average performance cards are a key factor in these high-performance workstations that we've built for SolidWorks. If you specialize in using SolidWorks and you need a nice computer for that, just contact me and let me know, and I will be happy to help you out with a computer like one of these, or something more powerful or more affordable depending on what you're looking for. Thanks so much.